All right, hello there. I'm going to be jumping right into this question because we have a lot to cover here. So I'm going to read the question first, and then I'm going to jump right into answering it. So here's the question. You're consulting with the hiring manager that just hired a high performer. This manager is asking you what they need to do to make sure that this person stays happy and works for the company for a while. You respond by getting to know this person and what they need slash what they want. And you specifically talk about reducing work-family conflict. What is some advice you would give to the hiring manager about reducing work-family conflict to ensure this person stays with the organization for as long as possible? All right, so it's a nuanced question, and the answer is also nuanced. I would start by providing some contextual education. Maybe there are some things that this manager intuitively knows, but needs some context to fully understand. One of the terms that I would teach this manager is boundaries, and I would tell them about boundary theory. Now, there are two characteristics of a boundary and two types of boundaries. One of the characteristics of a boundary is flexibility. How flexible is a boundary in time and space? Does it get a little more flexible around the holidays? Does it get a little less flexible in the spring? That's one of the characteristics. Another characteristic is permeability. How uh, how often does something leak through from one side to the other side? How permeable is that boundary? These are important because Clark's border theory also talks about something called a border guard. Now, the manager is in charge of that border on the work side. Sometimes a spouse is in charge of the border on the family side, and they're the keepers of this boundary. Now, it's important that this manager understands that they have now become the boundary keeper, and they need to be looking for signs that a boundary might be getting crossed, that it may be too flexible or too permeable. This is really important that the manager understands, and I think intuitively that they understand this, but I would draw some weight to it so that they can find, how to measure these things. Okay, so the second term, aside, we figured out boundaries. The second term that's important for this manager to know is idiosyncratic deals. Okay, this is where the magic happens when it comes to the solution. Idiosyncratic deals, as coined by Denise Research from Carnegie Mellon, is an arrangement between a manager and an employee, in this case, a high performing employee. Now, this is not company policy. This is a private arrangement between the manager and that higher performer. Now, Russo is careful to distinguish this from something like favoritism because an ideal, an idiosyncratic deal, has to benefit both sides. The employee gets something she needs, and then the manager gets something they need. So, those are the two terms that I would talk about with this manager to make sure that they're familiar with it because they're important, but they're not as important as this next thing, and that is defining what the high performer is concerned about. What type of work family conflict is this high performer most concerned about? Because there's three types. You have the strain based work family conflict, you have the time based work family conflict, and then you have the behavioral work uh, family conflict. Now, each of these are unique in their own way, so it's important that the manager understands what the high performer is most concerned about so that they can design an idiosyncratic deal that meets those needs. Now, one of the last things that I would reframe for this manager, or at least that I would get across to them, is how important trust is. Trust is very important. What they found, Horing, Rousseau, and Glaser, what they found was that idiosyncratic deals built around things like flexibility or autonomy, they kind of fall apart if there's no trust between the manager and the employee. So the employee gets more flexibility, they get more autonomy, but if they don't trust that manager, it becomes a patch rather than a solve, right? And that it falls through. So that trust is important. So my advice to the manager, and then I'm going to end with something really, really special. My advice to the manager is to diagnose the problem and then confirm that trust is there, and then use the understanding that they have with boundary keeping and idiosyncratic deals and how they work to figure out something that is going to be mutually beneficial. Now, here's why idiosyncratic deals are the magic, right? Ellen Kosak, distinguished professor at Purdue University and the founding president of Work Family Researchers Network, published research with Kelleher in 2023. What they found was astounding, showing employees, what they found was that employees with flexible ideals report one, higher job satisfaction, and two, are significantly less likely to intend to leave than employees without these ideals. And so this manager literally has the golden egg with idiosyncratic deals. It increases job satisfaction and it lowers the risk of employees leaving that they stay longer. So I would encourage this manager to become intentional about their solution and work out something with the high performer so that they are both mutually satisfied. Thank you very much.